Couple more. There we go. All right, welcome back, everyone. So we'll go ahead and get started with session 2. So for this session, we have Nate Hubler, Dean DeBolt, and Gaby Hale. So whenever y'all are ready, we'll wait for Nate to hop on here and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Vlogging the Archives. My name is Nate Hubler, and I'm a project archivist at the Avery Research Center for African American History and Culture at the College of Charleston. Today, I'm going to be talking about my experience writing blog posts for the Avery Research Center's website over the past year, kind of talking about newly processed collections that were available to the public and the joy I found in the process of writing them and sharing them with our general audience. But to begin with, I'd kind of like to start with why I think I'm writing the blog post, besides the fact that I really enjoy writing them. I do think they kind of serve a larger purpose in the mission of the Avery Research Center. The first is kind of baked into the very idea of them. They're meant to spotlight newly processed collections. They're meant to be an announcement to the general public that, hey, this new collection that we accepted is available for you to come in and look at and touch and do research with. So just kind of letting people know that it's out there. And then similarly, in the blog post, I'm usually trying to highlight specific moments and objects to tell just one of the stories or one of the narratives that exist among the many in the collection to kind of let people know some of the things they might find in the collection without actually having to go into the finding aid, which can be a little intimidating for some people if it's their first time ever encountering that sort of document. And then I'm also able to make connections in the blog posts between the new collection that's available and existing collections in our archives. So that could include the Avery Photograph Collection or the Avery School Memorabilia Collection. But depending on the context of the blog post, I might be able to make connections with other collections and kind of digitize a couple images to include in the blog post and kind of draw out sort of the interconnected history of all of the histories that are represented in our archives. And then finally, through the course of making the blog post, I'm identifying maybe a dozen or so photographs or letters or objects from the collection that I'm scanning and digitizing to include in the blog posts themselves to go along with the text. And then in turn, these create sort of interesting shareable access points that can be shared on our social media. So hopefully when someone's scrolling Instagram or Facebook, they see an image that captures their attention. They click through to read the description on the post, which is always just a little snippet from the blog. And hopefully that's enough to get them to come to our website, maybe read the blog post or poke around the website, and then hopefully come into the research center itself. So for the rest of my time, I kind of just want to focus on my joy that I found in different approaches to writing blog posts. None of them were ever the same. I didn't write a blog post for every single collection that I processed over the past year, but I did write one for the majority of them. And in some cases, I was kind of able to write multiple blog posts if like there were multiple accruals or something over the course of the year. So one way I approached writing the blogs was to bring new collections together. So in this example, I processed the papers of Dr. Leila Haynes Session, who was an educator, and the papers of Dr. James Brown, who was a dentist, back to back. And when I initially started working with their papers, I knew they were both students of the Avery Normal Institute, but I didn't know that they were actually from the same graduating class. But once I realized that, that seemed like such an obvious way to kind of approach the blog post. So I started by talking about their time at Avery together and what sort of programs and activities they were involved in, and then kind of celebrating their graduation. And then the blog post kind of diverges down these two different paths as Dr. Session goes to Allen University and enters into her teaching career and then eventually into education administration. And Dr. James Brown goes off to college and becomes a dentist. And while they're pursuing these different careers, they're both in the Low Country, they're both in Charleston or the Charleston area, and they're deeply embedded in the professional associations of their fields. And in the 50s and 60s in particular, not only were they really involved in their associations, but they were deeply committed to organizing within them to improve conditions against Jim Crow apartheid in the state and in the region. So Dr. Session was working to improve conditions in classrooms for Black students and improve the outcomes for Black teachers. And then similarly, Dr. Brown is working to improve health outcomes for Black patients and then also opportunities for Black medical practitioners. And then I kind of end the blog post by bringing them back together with their class reunion that they both attended. And in the collections, there's no evidence one way or the other of if they had any interactions between their initial graduation and the class reunion, but they definitely both attended the class reunion. So kind of just celebrating that they were able to spend one more night together, talking about their lives and memories and all that they'd accomplished over the past decades. Another strategy that I used was to kind of take myself outside of the archives or be inspired by the collections to go outside of the archives and actually see or experience something. So when I was writing a blog post to announce that Elmer Brown's papers were open to the public, I was inspired to go visit the Sullivan's Island African American Cemetery. And Mr. Brown, he grew up on Sullivan's Island. It's where he was born and raised, and it's ultimately where he spent the end of his life after he relocated back to Charleston, after he retired for the second time and then started a career in nonprofit and advocacy work. And one of his final missions was to get the African American Cemetery on Sullivan's Island to be historically recognized and do some restoration projects on the grounds so that it could be preserved for future generations. So he formed this group called the Original Islanders, and in the papers there's like financial records, letters, sort of memorabilia and stuff like that from his time with the organization, but there's not any sort of visual record of the cemetery grounds in the papers. So when I'm kind of ending the blog post talking about his work there, I was like, well, I need to go visit the cemetery and pay my respects and hopefully at least take a photo of the historical marker that's there now to kind of show that he was successful in what he did. He maybe didn't get all of the restoration projects accomplished that he wanted, but the gazebo you see in this photo, the fence that's kind of off to the side, and the historical marker were direct results of the work he was doing with Original Islanders. So I took the bus over to Sullivan's Island, or as close as I could get, and then walked over the bridge and kind of just sat in the cemetery for a bit, paid my respects, and reflected on sort of the collection and the ancestors who were there, and sort of the memories that exist both in the archives, and then if you're willing to do so, be inspired by the archives outside of them in the actual city that we live in Charleston. Another approach I took was to kind of write a travel blog. And this approach just seemed really obvious to me once I realized what was in the accrual I was working with. So I was working with an accrual to the Herbert A. DaCosta Jr. papers, who was an incredible architect in Charleston, and he did a lot of work with the preservation of historic buildings. And he was an architect, so we did a lot of the sketches and the manual labor. His wife, Emily, did a lot of the administrative upkeep and running of the company, sort of in the background. And a lot has been written or is understood about their architecture work, although, of course, certainly more should be written about that end of their lives. But I thought it would be interesting to look at what they were doing outside of work. So in the accrual, there's this really great journal that Emily kept, kind of just detailing their vacations and what they were doing day to day on various trips, what they were seeing, what they were eating, what she was thinking about everything, and what she thought Herbert was feeling about everything as well. And then on the other end, Herbert loved to take photographs. So in the accrual, there's a ton of photos, and a lot of them correspond with the vacations that Emily was writing about. So in the blog post, I kind of let Emily speak for herself, and I just used selections from her journal to kind of narrate two different vacations, and then use photographs or sketches from Herbert's end of things to kind of bring that together and tell a complete story. And then the final vacation, I covered their trip to South Africa with their daughter Gail. There wasn't any journal entries, but there were so many photographs that I could kind of let Herbert take the lead in terms of what I was talking about and showing through the photographs. And I just thought that was a really fun way to kind of approach what was in the collection with a very modern way of kind of talking about travel and adventures. And then finally, I really enjoyed finding ways to make connections to the present. So when I was writing the blog post for the Avery Institute of Afro-American History and Cultures records, I was really drawn to this speech from Senator Fielding for a handful of reasons. So he gave this speech at the kickoff ceremonies in 1985, which was a really big year of celebration for the Institute. It was the year that they hired the inaugural director of the Avery Research Center, Dr. Glasgow. It was the year that they signed the second memorandum of understanding with the College of Charleston to establish the Avery Research Center. And in 2025, from my perspective, It is a year of celebration. The work I'm doing on the Mellon Grant team at Avery is meant to be honoring and commemorating our own anniversary. So it's the 160th anniversary of the Avery Normal Institute opening its doors. It's the 40th anniversary of the Research Center being established, and the 35th anniversary of the Research Center opening its doors to the public. So kind of bringing those in line and kind of establishing that context. And then the content of the speech, I think, really spoke to the present moment I was writing in a couple months ago, where much of the speech, he's celebrating all that the Institute has accomplished, but he's recognizing the context of what they've done and stating how important it is because they are creating a space that is dedicated to the preserving, the curating, and the sharing of Black life and Black culture in Charleston, which is something that, despite the fact that in South Carolina there was a Black majority in the population for decades and decades, the lives and cultures of Black Americans and Gullah Geechee people has been largely left out or diminished in other archives. So the Avery Research Center stands to contribute to this or the historical record in a really meaningful way. And writing in 2025, as there's a lot of fears from various college and university administrations about what DEI is quote unquote permitted to look like in the present day, that just really spoke to me. So I kind of just established that context and then gave the mic over to Senator Fielding and essentially let him give the same speech again. And then just ended by talking about how much I thought this still rang true today. And thank you so much. I loved writing the blog posts.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. My joy in archive is a story called Story from the Archive. And this grew out of our um this grew out of COVID when our library was shut down, and we have a library publicity committee, and we were trying to find ways to publicize the library. And I had done a program for the League of Women Voters. It was year 2020, and they were celebrating 100 years of the 19th Amendment, and they contacted me and said, would I like to speak to them about the 19th Amendment? And I put together a program for them. And so I suggested to our library people that maybe I could do something like that. Our collection at the University of West Florida, if we covered the 10-county area, the Panhandle of Florida, so we get family papers and records and business records, church records, photographs. We subscribe to all the newspapers in the region with back files for those. And so it is a regional archive. And so one of the points of a regional archive to make sure people know what you have, that you can come in and do research. And also I want to turn them into angel looking for other gifts and things for us. And so the question was, how do we market our collection? How do we make people aware of them? And so the story from the archive, we started with a simple one, using the talk that I had given to the women's suffrage group. But what I did was I took the same talk and I also incorporated things from our collection. So I think it's important to know that you can also do talks in your organization that are national topics or topics you might not think you have anything in the collection, but if you can tie them in locally, you can. And we initially started with the very simple doing a talk. We advertised it in what's called our faculty staff newsletter. And I put together, showed off this program going through the history of the 19th Amendment and showing that the local chapter, there was a Pensacola Equal Suffrage League and all. And it went pretty good, the history of the right to vote. One of the interesting things that came out of my research was Florida could have been the first state to ratify the 19th Amendment. It was approved by the House, by the Senate on June 4th, and the Florida State Legislature was still in operation. But they had a rule against introducing new items not on their formal agenda, so they didn't do it. And Florida didn't fall into the group until 1969. And so that was a good start. And so we started our thing. I think the next talk I gave was supposed to be on Pensacola space traveler, first female astronaut. Now, that's key to, I think, these talks or to publicize collection of two little teasers that might not be. So people are going, Pensacola had an astronaut, a female astronaut. Um, and yes, we did. And this is her. Her name is Miss Baker, and she was a little monkey that the Navy at the time got a bunch of monkeys, and they started working with them, and she was launched into space. She was called Miss Baker. There were two animals launched, Miss Baker and Miss Abel, and the Army launched Miss Abel and Miss Baker. She was a a cute little monkey, and the and she came back, and Abel didn't survive. They had electrodes on the monkeys, and then removing the electrodes, Abel had a heart attack and died. And for this little monkey, Miss Baker became the first female astronaut. She became the first little recovery animal, and she was kept here at the Naval Aerospace Center here in Pensacola for many years. She was a big tourist attraction. There was always stories about her. Um, and then late in life, Werner von Braun had her moved to the Huntsville Space Center in Huntsville, and she passed away there, and her tombstone is there. Um, and uh, Alan Shepard gave her eulogy at the time of her passing, and so this grew out of one picture in the collection, and everybody liked this story. Then the October came along, and we said, okay, what are we going to do? And I said, well, I had all these people come in all the time asking for ghost stories. Okay, they come in and they buy a house in Pensacola, and they say, I hear there's ghosts. I want to find my ghost story. And of course, verifying these is just a nightmare, but everybody comes in. And so we came up with Ghostly Tales of West Florida, where I put things together about ghost story, both fictitious and non-fictitious. Um, and also, we also have a small collection of an organization a business organization in the 1930s who took their instruction from the beyond through automatic. They'd held seances and used automatic handwriting to get questions about their business. Um, I don't know about the credibility of that, but they're very interesting things. So we put together this ghost story. Now, obviously, our graphics have gotten better as we've gone along, and ghost stories and Thanksgiving and Valentine's have become our three holiday presentations. And I had not inclined to repeat them over time, but the problem was that our audience changes, our student population changes, our faculty change. We let the community know that we're doing these online, and so we have begun repeating some of them. The Valentine's are very popular. The ghost stories are very popular. A Thanksgiving theme is very popular. And so our graphics have gotten better. And sometimes we change the title. This is A Haunting We Will Go and Stranger Tales from the Archives. So these are examples of how we've done the Halloween thing. Thanksgiving, I did a program on the two Thanksgivings in 1939. Thanksgiving always fell on the last Thursday of November. And in 1939, a group of merchants went to FDR and said that made the Christmas season too short. And FDR came out with a proclamation moving Thanksgiving from the 30th of November in 1939 to the 23rd. And this was all done after all the calendars had been distributed and printed for the year and everything else. And so it created a big thing. And so I used some states observe the 23rd, some states observe the 30th. And it's an interesting story, it's a fun story. And I also incorporated local news and things about it. Valentine came along and we did an hour in the Valentine. Now, we have skipped August because school starts in August, plus starts late. And also, too many things are going on. In December, school ends early, and there are, again, too many things, but we don't do Christmas. However, I do have Christmas programs, and I take many of these programs out in the community, and I give them to places like the Rotary and the Lions and the League of Women Voters and Garden Club. And they're always looking for speakers, and it's a good way of outreach, of going out and talking to these people and telling them what's going on. And the Valentine, we use Valentine from our collection. Uh, the Kewpie ones are I like the Kewpie ones, but everybody gets a little shocked at the Kewpie one. And of course, like I say, our graphics have gotten better. So this was our graphic for this year. We publicize these through the campus newsletter, but we also put them on the library page. Where kudzu, we had turned up a local man, a gardener, who created a nursery for kudzu in 1908 and sold kudzu cuttings all over the Southeast and Florida, calling it the greatest forage plant the world had ever known. And of course, it became out of control. We also look for local events. Sanger Theater celebrating 100 years this year. I have two talks I gave on the Sanger. One is called "Let's Go to the Movies," pictures of the local theater and the history of the Sanger, but also one about the talk about the different innovation in the theater. I picked one year and just went through one year in 1930. They were moving from color, black and white, to color, different kinds of color things and so forth. This year, the 100 years of our scenic highway, and so I have just talked as well. And the scenic highway was voted to be created in 1925, part of US 90 that stretches across the north top of Florida. I also found a newspaper article about an elephant named Maxine. She was a circus elephant. The guy owned her in Pensacola, and he rented her out to the circuses from around March to November, and people could drive by and see her. I can't. She died here. He buried her on the property. I haven't been able to figure out where because he was outside of the city limits. The maps don't show, but I've been able to do newspapers.com to track this elephant all throughout the United States. She saved 3 people's lives. There are stories in the paper. It's a fun talk, and people like to hear about her. And she was very a favorite mascot of the local uh, naval aviation school, for example. One of the ones that gets most used right now is I finally put together one called Earliest Images of Pensacola Native People, taking images from McKinney and Hall as well as George Catlin painting, because we had so many people keep asking about what did the original Indians here look like. Now all of these are taped and they are put on the library website. And of course, some of them don't have a lot of viewing because we don't publicize this a lot, but the Native Americans kind of like up to 400. This is the kind of joy that I find in the archive, is sharing these stories, taking something out of the collection and then reusing it. And it's a great outreach. It's a lot of work, a lot of effort, but it does make our collection come to life. So thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Um, Welcome. Can you all hear me? Yes. Perfect. Thank you, Erin. So my name is Gaby Hale. I am the Outreach Archivist at Emory University's Rose Library in Atlanta, Georgia. And today I will be presenting No Appointment Needed: Unlocking Archives for Casual Visitors. I'll be giving an overview of an open house series that I started called Miscellaneous Monthly, followed by the planning process for it, the implementation, some outcomes of it, and then future opportunities that I see for it. So Miscellaneous Monthly is an open house series that I started in September 2024, roughly a year and a half after I started in my role of outreach archivist at Rose. And for context, Rose Library is the main special collections library at Emory. There are a few smaller ones, but we are the largest one. We have over 20,000 linear feet of manuscript materials and tens of thousands of rare books. So we're a large repository. The main impetus for this series was that we are also an appointment-only library, mainly due to the fact that most of our materials are stored at an off-site facility. While necessary, this appointment-based only format makes it difficult for people who are generally interested in history to visit Rose and satiate their curiosity, because they might feel that they don't have a real reason to visit Rose and do real research. In response, I created this open house series to be a low barrier way to engage with our archival materials. On the third Tuesday of each month, I set up a display of archival materials for people to stop in and view between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. These sessions are open to everyone, from Emory students and staff to the general public, with no appointment or registration required. If they can find their way to the 10th floor of the building to Rose Library, they can stay for as long as or as little as they like within that 2 hours. Each month has a different theme, so the archival items are constantly different, which encourages people to come back each month. In terms of planning, to make this series sustainable for me, I chose to front load the work and set up 4 months at a time, or roughly a semester at a time. I chose a recurring day of the month based on what was already scheduled for that upcoming semester, and I've done the third Tuesday of the month for the last 2 semesters. While I was choosing these dates, I made sure that the same room was available for each month and immediately booked it. And this room that I chose is the first room that you encounter when you enter Rose Library. Once I had these dates chose, I then picked out themes for each month. Some months corresponded to affinity months or holidays, like LGBTQ history in October, nature in April for Earth Month, Earth Day, Earth Month, and others were just topics that I was personally interested in, like activism and food history. I then created the promotional materials in Canva, beginning with a flyer and then making graphics for Instagram and Facebook, digital signage, and the Emory calendar. Canva's resizing tool came in very, very handy here because all of these items have different size requirements. Having graphics made specifically for each month during this planning phase made it really easy to promote the Miscellaneous Monthly Series once the semester is underway. There are several ways to promote events at Emory and at the library specifically, including a university-wide events calendar and digital signage. So at the beginning of each semester, I added all 4 events to the calendar and put that flyer up to run January, for example, in the spring, January through April. And then for analog folks, I did put up some paper flyers throughout the library and campus. Next, I created a Word document where I could create a pull list or list of archival items for each month. And then a week before the actual event, I pulled the list of items. I pull way more than I actually need. That way I can look through the items and choose the absolute best ones for that month. The work that I do at the beginning of each semester makes it really easy to implement the programming the day of. All I really have to do is set up the room about an hour before the event starts. I also send out that morning a mass reminder email to all Emory Library staff because a lot of people who attend are staff at Emory. And then right before the event begins, I put a sign on the door reminding people to not bring in food or drinks. And I also put up directional signage in front of our elevators. That way people know where to go when they get onto our floor. And after that, the magic happens. I remain in the room for the whole 2 hours and I answer questions people might have about the items or about Rose Library or even about archives in general. So this ongoing series has fulfilled my goal of allowing people to engage with archival materials in a casual way. When I first began, I envisioned students and members of the public attending the sessions. And while they certainly still do, the most consistent and supportive audience I have for the open houses are Emory Library staff, both those in Rose and also those in Emory's other libraries. We're a large system. I think there's like 6 to 8 different libraries, and I think like about 100 people are employed. Don't quote me on that. So through this inReach, I believe that our non-archives colleagues have a much better understanding of what Rose Library offers, both in terms of our collections and also our services. I've gotten to know people from these other libraries on campus in person, which can be very, very difficult to do at Emory. We're very Zoom-based. And I have several devoted librarians from across the campus who come nearly every month. I've also had a few large groups visit, including from Emory's offices of undergrad education and advancement/alumni affairs. You can see one of the groups on the screen. One of these groups gave me a heads up before they came, which I really did appreciate, but others have just shown up and they've had fun engaging with the materials together with their colleagues. When I asked these groups and also people of the general public who attend how they learned about this event, they've mentioned seeing it on the university's calendar and coming out in Emory's newsletters. The connections that I've made have also inspired other projects. One month, I was chatting with an attendee about a specific item from an Atlanta-based women's club, and then the following week, she emailed me saying that she was a writer from Emory and that she'd like to do a story on the women's club and asked for my assistance. So I put her in contact with a contact that I know from the women's club. The women's club is still going, and now they're working on the story together, which will shout out Rose Library in the collection that we have. During another month, a colleague from Emory's Oxford campus, which is about 45 minutes away from Atlanta, it's the original campus, came to view the materials I had out about Native American history. He was considering doing a display on that topic, but didn't know if Emory had enough materials to support it. I provided him and his colleague with a list of the materials I had out, plus the ones that I've used in the past, but didn't have out that day. And last I heard, they were moving forward with the exhibit. Another outcome of this is that in addition to my colleagues learning about our collections, I personally now have a much better knowledge of our vast collections just by creating the pull list each month. And I've also learned more about our collections from the attendees themselves. So I've had some people who are native to Atlanta or who attended Emory as a student share information with me about items that the items themselves couldn't tell us. And I also one month had a collection donor who happened just to be on campus that day come by, and I had his photographs out. And so he got to share information with attendees about his collection. Lastly, on this topic, attendance has been gradually growing since the first event. So I've loved having my Rose colleagues support. They're really wonderful, especially in the beginning. But I've been really happy to see a wider variety of folks visiting each month. In May and June, for example, I had between 35 and 45 people stop in, the majority of which stayed a good chunk of time and really engaged with me in the materials. And then the items on the screen here are just some of the items I've had out over the last year or so. And going forward, I am planning to continue this series into the fall, which I'll start preparing for next month. As part of that, I plan to increase the number of channels that I promote the series through. I really want to get more of public involvement and buy-in for this. And so I'm investigating ways to get the word out to the Atlanta and Decatur communities that surround Emory. And then lastly, I have entertained the thought of partnering with my Rose colleagues on specific months. While I love this series, it definitely sparks joy for me. Implementing it myself I love doing it. But I do think that it's now in a good position where a coworker of mine could sponsor a month. So they could choose its theme, decide on the items themselves, and be the expert in the room on the day for our visitors. So I want to thank you for your time today, and I hope that this has provided some instruction on how you can start your own open house at your own institution. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gabby. We got some things to talk about at our next Georgia Southern Speckle meeting. So thank you, Nate, Dean, and Gabby. So if there are any questions or thoughts that you wish to share with our presenters, now is the time. You could either unmute yourselves, or if you're not comfortable with speaking out loud on the Zoom, just type your question or thought into chat and be happy to share it with our speakers.
So I have a question. What is that giant picture of the cat about, Gaby? In the last slide.
The cat. Oh, okay. That's one of my favorite collections. So it's an artist collection. Her name was Callie Archibald, and she was a housewife in the 60s on Long Island. Her name was Joan back then. And she decided that she didn't like being a housewife. And so she left her family, moved to Palm Springs or Malibu, I always mix it up, and decided to change her name to Callie with a K and hang out with gay people and become an artist. And so she created what she called artography, which is where she'd take these really beautiful pictures like of the cat. And then she would, once she printed it and developed it, she'd add on color and florals and other elements to make kind of like a wacky, really beautiful picture. And yeah, later on, she believed aliens lived in her backyard. So it's just one of my favorite collections. December was photography themed items. And so those are out.
Legend, absolute legend.
Right.
I'm gonna say props to her. I guess I'll ask my traditional question. Nate, have you gotten any feedback from readers or patrons or anything about your blogs? I mean, they look fantastic, but I was just wondering if you like, do you get any comments or do people just sort of read them?
Thank you. Haven't gotten many comments outside of like the context of social media with like people leaving comments on the posts that we make. Haven't heard, as far as I know, anything from patrons or anything like that. I think the closest we've come to that is we've been doing interviews for artists for an upcoming exhibit, working with collections, and a handful of artists were talking about wanting to work with the Lewis Holmes scrapbook, which I'd written a blog post for. And we weren't really sure why they were so drawn to the scrapbook. So a possible chance is that they read that blog post and were intrigued by like the images and stuff that we scanned that they thought they could work with. But I don't actually know 100% if that's the case.
I also have a question for Nate. So do you write all of the blog posts that go up, or do any of your colleagues also write blog posts?
No, my other colleagues definitely write blog posts as well. And in some of my posts, like in previous summers, like interns have written posts and stuff like that, or they've done like research projects and written about them. So I've been able to connect with those. But yeah, no, so it's not necessarily always about new collections. Sometimes it's like historical overviews or Miss Mayo, our processing archivist, she did this really great trip to London where she was an ambassador of this program going from different museums and kind of talking about history as it exists in the UK. And then she did like a really great write-up on our blog, kind of talking about everything she learned from everyone that was participating in that. So the blog definitely kind of serves as like a sort of window into the activities of everyone at Avery.
That's great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, let me unmute myself. Try again. All right. So Dean, I'm guessing you are getting feedback. That's how you know these things are so popular. But have anyone told you about it, like any of their particular favorite? Like, do you get repeat customers who just want to hear the same story over and over again? Because
I
I've done events here where they're family history events, and I'm like me telling my stories, and they just show up because they want to hear me tell the story again. I'm like, y'all.
yeah, I've gotten of course there are unfortunately our university PR people have categorized so they don't send out a campus-wide newsletters anymore. If one goes to faculty, one goes to faculty. I don't know what goes to the students. We try to channel all of them to get them all together. But among the faculty and staff, I'm getting things like, "Oh, if Dean's going to do that Valentine's show again, I saw that last year. You've got to see that." And I'll get 3 or 4 people out of the same office or whatever. I never know what the size of the audience. We have picked Wednesdays from 12 to 1 as our main time, mainly because Tuesdays and Thursdays are the heaviest class days, for example. Fridays there's a faculty senate meeting, that kind of thing. And I tried different times. I tried moving to 1 o'clock. We tried 1 o'clock a couple months. That didn't work very well. But the noon hours seem to think faculty and staff and others. And because the university is constantly changing and the staff is changing, I'm getting more different people, different mix of audiences. Um, and then I'm getting students, and we also publicize it outside the university. So because we're a community center, a lot of our outside you see the thing on the library homepage because it comes up right as a banner at the top when you log in. Um, and so the audiences change, but they grow. Sometimes they're small, sometimes they're not. It just depends. But I get a lot. I do get feedback from them, and I have gotten some several donations of collection, family papers, and manuscript because of it.
Yeah, I was also going to say, if you might contemplate sharing the link with the SEAA listserv, because some of those sessions I would love to go to. You
All
know,
right, that's a fair idea. They're fun. I make them fun, and I'm known for throwing in my silly jokes like, "Oh dear, I think they're going to fall on Thursday again this year." Um, and things like that, and all.
Right.
So I'm kind of known for that. So I try to make them, try to liven them up a little bit, and there's always something new, something I can add to the story later on, something that comes up. It's a lot of fun.
The Thanksgiving one was, I was really surprised that Mississippi was obeying the feds on that one and going with the
It
later
that was
date.
it's a strange it's a insert FDR did that again in 1940. And by then, Congress had enough of it, and they passed a law making it the fourth Thanksgiving, the fourth Thursday of the month. But this double thing, they didn't know when to play. The football games had already been scheduled, but people had to work. If you looked at that cartoon, the guy says, "I'm going to have turkey," and the kid said, "I only see one turkey here. Are you out of your mind?" And of course, I had restaurants trying to order food, and they didn't. Should we order for the 23rd or the 30th? I mean, you can't. And from today, so where we're sitting today, we cannot imagine the chaos that they've created. Well, maybe we can in the current climate, but anyhow, it was just a fun talk to do and to tie it in locally.
Yeah, I mean the SEC would be in complete disarray if we had Thanksgiving on two different days.
Yeah.
The football scheduling conundrum is for real. Yeah.
Like, do you have two rivalry weekends if there's two Thanksgivings? Like, what do you do?
Like, right, do we play the Egg Bowl twice? Disaster. The Egg Bowl, so those of you who don't know, the University of Mississippi and Mississippi State have their rivalry game on Thanksgiving.
Mhm.
And so, and sometimes it's like on the actual day, and sometimes it's on the weekend. They kind of go back and forth, but usually it's on the day, and it moves between Starkville and Oxford. And so if the Egg Bowl is at home in Starkville, restaurants will be open for Thanksgiving, and if it's not, everything closes.
Mm.
So if you want to go out for your Thanksgiving, you better cross your fingers and hope that the Egg Bowl is at home. Otherwise you're out of luck. But yeah, if you had two Thanksgivings, I guess we could play it once in Starkville, once in Oxford, and that would, like, again, disaster. So
All right.
yes, someone said simulate both economies. Yeah, it sure would.
All right. Do we have any more questions or thoughts to share with our presenters for this session? I did have one. Nate, I do enjoy how you said in your blog post you connect the collections that you are currently working on with collections that have already been processed and kind of like bringing the collections together. I was like, I love that because like it all goes together.
Thank you.
All right, last call. Bueller. Okie dokie. So we'll take a little bit of a break and we'll be back at 9:50 Central, 10:50 Eastern.